Hello everyone and welcome back to our channel. When trying to pin down an artist's personal favorite from their body of work, it's often a fruitless endeavor, especially when the artist has a long, celebrated discography. For Paul McCartney, one of the principal songwriters and founding members of the Beatles, it's been no different. Over the years, countless interviewers and critics have tried to get McCartney to reveal his favorite Beatles album. And while he is occasionally obliged, his answer tends to reaffirm what many fans have already guessed. However, what is perhaps more intriguing is not what McCartney loved most about his time with the Beatles, but what left him the most disillusioned. In numerous interviews stretching back decades, McCartney has expressed admiration for virtually all the albums he created with John Lennon, George Harrison, and Ringo Starr. However, when pressed to name a favorite, he often highlights Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, the groundbreaking 1967 concept album that marked a creative zenith for the group. Released on June 1, 1967, the record became a cultural milestone and remains widely hailed as one of the most influential albums in music history. For McCartney, Sgt. Pepper was more than just another entry in the Beatles' catalog. It was a deeply personal project. He once reflected that if the band had a director, he likely filled that role for Sgt. Pepper. His fingerprints are all over the record, from its whimsical concept to its positive and kaleidoscopic musical tone. Tracks like Getting Better and With a Little Help from My Friends reflect McCartney's optimistic creative spirit during a time when the band was exploring new sonic territories. In interviews from the early 1990s, McCartney admitted that the album stood out for him, not only because of its musical innovations, but also because of how much creative energy he had invested into it. It was a product of vision, leadership, and meticulous artistic planning. When Brian Epstein, the band's longtime manager, passed away in 1967, the Beatles found themselves in need of a new kind of leadership. While Lennon had long held that informal role, his growing disengagement from the studio led McCartney to step up and provide the cohesion the group so desperately needed. In contrast to this period of imaginative triumph, the final stages of the Beatles' career were marked by personal and professional fragmentation. The album Let It Be, which was released in 1970 but recorded earlier than Abbey Road, serves as both an artifact of this disintegration and the flashpoint for one of McCartney's most intense frustrations. Unlike Sgt. Pepper, where McCartney had significant creative control, Let It Be was a project mired in conflict. The original concept was for a back-to-basics record that would showcase the band playing together in a more raw, unfiltered form, capturing the energy of their early years. However, this concept unraveled as tensions grew within the band. The resulting footage and recordings, initially dubbed Get Back, were shelved as the group focused on Abbey Road. When they returned to salvage the project, things took an unexpected turn. Enter Phil Spector, the infamous American producer, known for his signature wall of sound production style. John Lennon, with support from George Harrison and Ringo Starr, brought Spector on board to finalize the project. McCartney, however, was kept largely out of the loop. One of the album's central tracks, The Long and Winding Road, written by McCartney as a plaintive piano ballad, became the focal point of his anger. The song for McCartney was meant to be stripped down and intimate, just voice, piano, and perhaps minimal instrumentation. But Spector had other ideas. In the process of producing the final version, he overdubbed the track with sweeping strings, horns, and a female choir. Without McCartney's approval, one of his vocal takes was even erased to make room for the new orchestral elements. The result was a version that bore little resemblance to his original intent. When McCartney received the reworked track, he was outraged. In interviews and public statements from 1970, he expressed disbelief that changes of such magnitude could be made without his input. He said he would never have allowed female voices on a Beatles track and lamented the lack of control he had over a song that was deeply personal to him. Despite sending a request to manager Alan Klein to have the changes reversed, McCartney received no response, further exacerbating his discontent. Even George Martin, the Beatles' longtime producer, and often referred to as the fifth Beatle, was angered by the alterations. He later admitted that he and McCartney were both blindsided by the modifications, which had been orchestrated behind their backs. Martin believed that the handling of the album symbolized the broader power struggles that had come to define the band's final days. The disagreement over the long and winding road and Spector's involvement became emblematic of the breakdown in communication and trust within the band. To many, it was clear that the Beatles were no longer functioning as a unified creative force. McCartney, a meticulous craftsman who thrived on collaboration and mutual respect, was devastated by the sense that his artistic voice had been ignored. Over the years, this episode has contributed to the somewhat contentious narrative surrounding McCartney's role in the band. Critics and fans alike have sometimes portrayed him as controlling or overly commercial, casting him in contrast to Lennon's raw artistry. But a more generous interpretation suggests that McCartney was simply a dedicated musician striving for artistic integrity in an increasingly chaotic environment. Rather than seeking the spotlight, he was trying to preserve the essence of the Beatles' music as he envisioned it. Despite his dissatisfaction with the final product, Let It Be remains an essential part of the Beatles' legacy. While the album may be best known for marking the end of the band's career, it also contains several beloved songs that rank among their finest. Tracks like Get Back, Across the Universe, and the anthemic Let It Be itself reflect moments of brilliance amid the turbulence. Still, McCartney's unease with the record hasn't entirely faded. In 2003, he spearheaded the release of Let It Be Naked, a reimagined version of the album that stripped away Spector's embellishments in favor of a cleaner, more organic sound. For McCartney, it was a chance to reclaim the songs as they were originally intended. While Let It Be Naked received a mixed response from critics, it served as a cathartic moment for McCartney and a symbol of artistic restoration. Ultimately, Paul McCartney's journey with the Beatles encompasses moments of triumph and frustration. While Sgt. Pepper's represents a high point of creativity and vision, Let It Be stands as a reminder of the pitfalls of compromised artistry. Both albums are deeply woven into the fabric of the band's history, and each tells a different story about what it meant to be a Beatle in the 1960s. Though fans will forever debate which Beatles album reigns supreme, there is no denying the emotional weight that Let It Be carries for McCartney. It is a record that, in his eyes, represents what could have been a reminder of lost control, fractured relationships, and the struggle to preserve one's voice in a storm of competing agendas. In the end, the long and winding road that McCartney wrote about was not just a metaphor in a song, it was the very path he was walking, as his time with the Beatles drew to a close. And there you have it, the story behind Paul McCartney's favorite Beatles album, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, and the deep frustration he felt over Let It Be. It's a tale of creative highs, emotional lows, and the long and winding road that marked the end of the greatest band in history. If you enjoyed this Beatles history, don't forget to like this video, share it with fellow fans, and drop your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss more stories behind the music that changed the world. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.